Hello, puppies and kittens. A week or so ago, I was talking to somebody who had some additional information from the realm of, well, not animal husbandry, but zoology, the different kind of requirements that different life forms have, and why that would mean that Noah suddenly becoming the world's expert herpetologist without any background information at all would render the Noah's Ark fiasco completely absurd. Now, we know but people who believe in Noah's Ark know that this didn't happen. They know they're full of shit. I realize there's a whole lot of people living in trailers somewhere in the backwoods areas that actually think this is real because they don't have any kind of education at all. But when you talk to people like Kent Hovind or Ken Ham or Ray Comfort, they know. They know they're full of shit. But they're bringing in millions of dollars a year. All three of those names that I just mentioned are bringing in millions per year. And all they have to do is spout the same stupid nonsense, and all it's all a game of make believe. So you're selling people salvation, you're selling people immortality, you're selling people literally fucking magic. And it's all based on believing the sacred fables, no matter how stupid they are, even when they're impossibly goddamn dumb. And that's what defending the Noah's Ark thing is all about. So PhilosoShy saw this show that we did with this guy that was talking about the different aspects of zoology and keeping all these different exotic pets and everything at the kind of conditions that they require. Obviously, I have a clue about that myself. I have different humidity requirements and temperature requirements and all of that for the various snakes in my collection. So yeah, I get that. But PhilosoShy now has the animal husbandry aspect of it. Now, you may not be aware, but we have been using evolutionary principles. We've been relying on evolutionary principles throughout the entire history of agriculture. We just unwittingly so. It wasn't until the last 150 years that we started to understand why things work the way that they do. And so we can better manipulate them, more deliberately than the luck of the draw following patterns the way we did before. PhilosoShy, why don't I let you take over from here and explain your perspective?
Thank you very much for having us, Aaron. First and foremost, we really liked the zoology thing. We actually listened to the entire thing while we were cleaning rabbit cages. And a lot of people think, oh, that's not a big bet, that's not a big thing or whatever. We have like 27 rabbit cages. We have over 70 rabbits, so it takes like 4 hours to do the entire thing. So it was an excellent distraction during.
I think I am up to. I'm up to 53 in the house at the moment. I have 53 snakes.
Oh, so you know how it is.
Yes, and Wednesday, I've deliberately made it so that most of my all of my weekly feeders are on Wednesdays, and some of the ones that are on a different schedule also fall on Wednesday. So most of my own personal ones, because my wife has the bulk of them, but most of my own personal ones, they were all feeding today. And they have time requirements. There's only certain times that some of them are nocturnal. Some of them, you have to feed them before 10 a.m. or they'll turn their nose up.
Yeah.
So I have to cater to the diurnal versus nocturnal and so forth.
Yeah, and
it's a weird ritual in this house.
We're finding that goats are. We just got some goats, and we're finding they're the same way. They're a lot more persnickety than chickens or the rabbits. So
that wasn't the reputation ever regarding goats.
It wasn't. We were told like, yeah, they'll just do anything, but no, actually, the goats are all like kind of like, yeah, no, we don't really want this, that, or the other thing. We don't want apple leaves. Screw you. We're like,
I remember the goats
just
saying,
chop down part of the environment and give it to you.
Realizing at a 12-year-old boy when my family was keeping goats, and realizing that, hey, we don't eat tin cans. What the hell's wrong with you?
No. Yeah, they eat the paper off of it. Yeah.
We had to keep goats. We kept chickens, and I had to milk goats. I had to drink goat's milk. And where we lived, I've lived in some weird ass places, but I mean, at this point, when I was 12, I was living with my dad. We were living in as I remember, a single wide trailer way the fuck out in the desert, so that you had to drive for a long time on dirt.
Oh, jeez.
A long time on dirt to get to where his trailer was. So, there would if we were in the time of cell phones and everything, there would be no cell phone signal. There was just nothing. But of course, this was in the 70s, so there were no cell phones. All there were was his trailer, and then he had a brother that had a trailer like across the street, across the goat path.
Yeah.
Right? So you have like two trailers out in the middle of fucking nothing, desert, Arizona desert, parched, absolute dry. And during the day, we would do the things we have to take care of the chickens and the goats. And I don't know how the hell they're getting water for these things. In retrospect, if I could go back there now, I would be fossil hunting all of that area, because he was in a beautiful place for that sort of thing. But when I noticed, I remember telling my dad at 12 years old that one of the roosters stalking around his pen, I'm like, that moves exactly like a Tyrannosaurus. That really looks like a fucking dinosaur. And my dad saying to me, "That's all bullshit, son." He thought dinosaurs were bullshit. I guess he thought that dinosaurs didn't exist. I don't know. And the only other interesting thing that I can remember is that in the early dawn and dusk hours, he would have to leave the family in the car to go out and clear the driveway so that we could get from the car to the house. He would have to clear the driveway with a shotgun that had a flashlight duct taped to it.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Because of rattlesnakes.
Yeah, that's Eastern Oregon. That's funny enough. So
for me, it was Western
Western Arizona. Yeah. So we're actually in like the opposite. It's just green everywhere, so much so that the plants are growing over you while you try to bed down for the night, while you camp and you wake up, and the blackberry brambles
consumed by the kudzu.
Yeah, exactly. And the blackberry brambles are like coming up around you, and you're like, "Oh shit!" It's like that around here. But it's also no service, none of that, out in the middle of nowhere. 45 minutes to the nearest hospital. So anything wrong happens, good luck.
Yeah.
So during the zoology thing, we're just a farm shy. We're just a standard farmer type, but we're trying to do our part for science. And one of those things we noticed is that let's assume that we're gonna do something that we know you don't do terribly much. We're gonna be merciful. We're going to be as nice to the creationists as we possibly can be, as generous as we can be. So the creationists are saying that the flood happened at 4500 BCE. Boom, that's the cutoff line right there. All right. Anything that was domesticated before 2500 BCE, Noah can have. He gets it. It's free. Cattle, so on and so forth. That's fine. You don't have to explain them. We're going to be nice here. We're also going to leave out most invertebrates because they don't have the breath of life, and we're going to leave out all, allegedly.
Well, how did they keep alive then?
Well, again, we're being merciful here. We're being as nice as we can be. There are going to be a couple invertebrates we're not going to let them have, but most of them we're going to let them get away with. Okay, and then finally, we're not going to be dealing with any fancy fun animals. No, rats. No generic pets. No canaries. We don't really care about those. Well, pets, things that would not provide Noah any use anyway. We're just going to be talking about the animals that people have domesticated for, the use of some sort, for some sort of utility. And then, but then in 2500 BCE, the flood happened, allegedly. God allegedly sent to every kind of the ark, and then there was a year of flooding.
2500?
2500 BCE.
Well, that would be 2900 was the one that archaeologists and geologists agreed upon in the flood of Shuruppak.
Oh, geez. Well, we guess we were being even nicer than they deserve. That would require a bit more research. So for this one, we're going to assume.
Oh no, the creationist organizations insist that it was in the 24th century BCE. They want it to be 23 something. So Answers in Genesis, the Institute for Creation Research, and the creation, some other creation bullshit propaganda.
Discovery Institute.
They all come up with 2300 and then different numbers after that. And they're all going by the same basis. They're all going by Bishop Ussher. So how they came up with 3 different dates using the same math, I don't know.
Wild.
But
That's
it's all in the
fascinating.
it's all in the 24th century BCE somewhere.
Well, that's as it so happens. It doesn't matter which direction we go; it's worse for them no matter what. 20 because of how completely ridiculous all of this is, just on the face of it, as far as animal husbandry goes. So you'll have to forgive us, all the creationists out there who are watching.
You want creationists to forgive you.
Oh yeah, right.
But that would be the Christian thing to do.
Right.
Judge
exactly.
not. Judge not, lest ye be judged, except when your religion is all about judging people.
Right. Oh man, that's great. So we're gonna say, for the sake of example here, that 2500 comes around. That's when the flood is, because they can make three different times. We can make a new different time. It's fine. It's all religion and mythology to us. So we'll say, for the sake of argument, that 2500 happens. The world flood, year of flooding, Ararat. Then he let all the animals go off, and they kangaroos bounce off to Australia or whatever. The moment that the flood happens, then they're on our territory. That's farmland right there. So
how do you have farmland without? There's these things that farmers know about, so I suspect you're aware of them.
Oh, yeah.
Soil horizons.
So we're not a crop farmer, interestingly enough, so we don't know nearly as much about the crop aspect of it.
Okay, so you're only doing animal husbandry. You're not doing the agricultural aspect.
This one is just animal husbandry this time around.
So what I'm spoiling here
oh boy.
is that if there really was a global flood such as the Bible describes, there wouldn't be bacteria left. I mean, there wouldn't be any kind of soil horizons at all. There wouldn't be plant one. You wouldn't be able to send a raven out and find an olive tree, because there wouldn't be any fucking olives. A year under a mile of salt water, there wouldn't be any of that.
Everything's brined. Yeah, nothing grows, man. Sorry.
Yeah, so your koalas, your 2 koalas that have to make their way back to their eucalyptus groves in Australia.
Yeah.
Well, the eucalyptus groves don't exist. There's no way they could. So they would have to not eat anything, while they also hold their breath as they try to cross the ocean to get back to Australia. But
right, didn't you talk about that in the zoology one? How like tons of these things that these things eat would all just be dead and wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
But again, we're being very nice. We're being merciful here. We're going to allow all of those fancy acts of bullshit to happen. Okay, so we covered in the very first episode, and in the second thing we were with you, that God did not make the domestic god or domestic dog or the domestic duck or anything like that. We made those. Humans made those from wild ancestors, and those ancestors would have ended up allegedly on Noah's ship. So we think with 9 points, with 9 helpful little bullet points here, we can completely dismantle this story. But again, we are merciful, so we're allowing them an out. We're going to allow them one alternative. They can admit either that Noah's Ark, the biblical flood, it never happened, or they can admit, again, we're being merciful here, that Noah is a blithering idiot who was the worst possible individual under all circumstances across every metric for an all-powerful, all-knowing, allegedly all-benevolent being to assign to this task.
Well, hold on. Let's put this into perspective, because we know what kind of a judge of character God is. Shut up, dog.
Oh, that we do.
Yeah. So whenever God chooses somebody for one of these special kind of missions where you're the only righteous one, you're the only one worthy of saving, he always chooses a naked old drunk molesting their own children.
Oh yeah, or something along those lines. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's always pretty gross. Yeah. So we mean, and allegedly this guy is all knowing and all powerful, so there has to be some malice there. He's got to be doing this because he's a dick.
Yeah.
So our 9 points rely around 3 main subjects. first and foremost, there were things that were already domesticated that made their way allegedly to the ark, and then Noah, seeing, having them for a year, seeing that they were domesticated, then let them go back to people who were dead. So we'll get to that. That one's our favorite one of all this. But then there were things on the ark that went on to be domesticated by somebody else. We have the previous one, we have 3 standouts. This one, the ones that went on to be domesticated by someone else, somewhere else, and someone else. Sometimes like very soon thereafter. We have 14 standouts, and then there are semi-domesticates that went on, like elephants and mandarin ducks and things like that, and ostriches that would be semi-domesticated later on. That it's either 21 or maybe up to 24 if you'll allow some allowances.
Give me just a moment, if you would.
No
I'm going to
problem.
read a couple of chats that have come up. Thomas Shisheki offers $1.99. It says, "Is Noah a standard patriarch?" Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
He's literally the father of humanity, according to this story, which we know that there's no truth to the story at all. But it logically in this story, we would all have to be the incestuous sons of Noah.
Well, and it's a little worse than that, actually, because he says a standard patriarch. And when we think about that, we think about the paterfamiliaris, the patriarch of the Roman family, wherein the oldest male of your family dictates everything that goes on. There are literal instances of the fathers of Roman emperors walking into court and pulling them off the throne and spanking them in front of their court because they are the oldest man in the family. You have to listen to them. And Noah was 100% that. It was him and his wife, and then his 3 sons and their daughters, and his 3 sons had to do whatever the hell he said, or
Have you ever been spanked by a 600-year-old man?
Yeah, it's got to be humiliating.
A 600-year-old man using Stone Age technology with his 3 sons that built a ship that Ken Ham required hundreds of people, $100 million investment. Modern cranes, modern trucks, just to bring in the lumber required trucking all across the country.
Oh, yeah.
And it took a year and a half with $100 million investment, and everything had to be covered in all this waterproofing equipment and all of this equipment, just the high-speed drills, everything, the air conditioning system. It's staggering what all went into that fabrication that isn't even a boat. It's just a building that looks like a boat if you stand on one side.
And it still leaks when it rains.
Yeah. So if Noah was actually building this floating box, we got to think now. Stone Age technology, 4 people, and the only one who apparently knows anything at all is 600 years old, and he lives at a time when nothing was known about how to build a ship.
Well, clearly he had. Now, this is a farmer bias coming out, but clearly he domesticated an animal that we do not have on this list. He domesticated the gopher. Thus, the gopher would. And the gopher is all for. Sorry, we had to. We've been holding that one in for a while.
Okay.
All right. So so we have 9 points here that we will either completely demolish Noah's flood, or it will completely demolish Noah, and we're okay with either. We're sure you are too.
We got some twit in the chat who remember when I mentioned that how the religious leaders, the ones who perpetuating these creationist stories, that they are deliberate liars. They know that they're full of shit.
Yeah.
We got somebody using the troll name Reason and Science.
Oh, okay, we see that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're saying all kinds of ridiculous shit. They're saying that the fossil record proves Noah's flood, which absolutely it does not. It completely overturns that. And I've already done this video is going to be part of the playlist of other videos that explain how that is the case. How the fossil record definitely disproves Noah's flood. And then they said some other stupid thing like soft tissue in dinosaurs proves a young Earth. Yet the very person who found the soft tissue,
Mary Schweitzer, would like to know your location.
Right. Well, she was a young Earth creationist when she started working in the Paleo Lab. And then after all of these discoveries, after all that, She's now convinced of old Earth evolution. She's still a Christian,
Yeah, yeah.
but she's an old Earth evolutionist now. And she hates the embarrassment to her faith, to her religion, when all of these creationists, all these young Earth creationists, cite her research as if it proves a young Earth, which only embarrasses her. So these people who lie for apologetics are driving her further from her beloved belief. They are ruining her Christianity. And so she's pleading with the young Earth creationists to please shut the fuck up about dinosaur soft parts proving a young Earth, because it doesn't. But she can't stop these people because they're absolutely sold on utter bullshit. It's all make believe. They know it.
Yeah, we actually remember listening to a track where she was saying, like, please just stop using my name. Like, stop using my name, please. And we legitimately feel for the girl. We really do. We're just over here like, no, man, come on, like, leave her alone. Just leave her alone.
I get that. I get that too. I mean, kudos that she was able to accept some reality, because a lot of religious apologists just flat out won't accept any reality at all.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what the fuck. And they'll tell me that if they don't like whatever the situation is, they can just lie about it until the lie becomes true, because all you got to do is convince yourself.
Yeah, because
if you can believe it hard enough,
right?
If you believe it hard enough, well, then the reality will bend around your will. And it doesn't matter that there's 7 billion people who accept what the evident reality is. Somehow your power of imagination is going to override everybody else. Somebody sent me a message today accusing me of being biased toward objective truth. I kid you not.
Oh my God.
Said that they told me that I can't. This is an actual email. They said that objective truth doesn't matter when it's compared to, and they put it in quotations, religious truth. They put the quotations on that. So objective truth doesn't matter compared to religious truth. So can you get a better admission that they know it's fucking make-believe?
Oh man,
that it isn't real?
It could be our religious truth that those chickens love us and will mourn our passing. But when we get a heart attack and we fall down in that pen and die, they are going to go for the eyes first, and they're going to do it the moment that we stop moving. Period. That's it. That's the facts. Whoever says these things have not been a farmer. It just doesn't understand how reality works.
Farhan Salas offers $9.99 and says, grateful for the audiobook version of Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. Listened to it about 50 times now. Very informative and concise. Thanks, Arn. Thank you very much for that. Okay, PhilosoShy. I'm tired of interrupting. I'm sorry. I'm tired of it. I'm apologizing for interrupting as often as I do. Please continue.
We have a lot of fun with it, so it's good from our perspective. So we have 9 bullet points that we believe can either demolish the flood or demolish Noah, and we're cool with either one. And so the first one we're going to do is, not all animals we know of yet were domesticated at the time of the flood, so we will be concerning ourselves only with animals that were domesticated after or during the alleged time of the biblical flood. That's not really like a big thing. That's just we can just skip through that one real fast because it's just the overwhelming context. So
one second before you do. I'm sorry.
Yep.
PhD Tony offers $10, I'm guessing Australian, and says, to the religious mind, blind and unshakable belief, despite the evidence, is a virtue, which is another mystery to me. How can you claim being unreasonable as if that's a virtue? But anyway, go ahead. Bullet point number 1.
They make their own rules. So that was bullet point number 1. That was just a quick little bit of context there. It moves on to bullet point number 2, which is that Noah had the opportunity to domesticate every single animal that we have since domesticated, but he did not. Now that is a very damning piece of information about his character. He clearly had a bunch of animals that could be useful to him, and he just didn't for whatever reason, he didn't take them. He didn't figure it out. Now, for some animals, that's like, okay, sure, whatever. For others, it's completely inexcusable. And we'll get into that later. So point number 3, that very quickly. And remember, he was able to take care of these animals for an entire year. So he must have known a lot about animals, or God must have imparted him with some fantastical knowledge about how animals work, or whatever. He was able to feed and take care of them and so on for an entire year.
Despite all their special dietary requirements,
Oh, yeah.
despite the vast amount of intake that some of these animals required, you had to have all the food on board, of course. So
absolutely.
The sheer metric tonnage of foliage, that's just for the herbivores. What about for all the carnivores?
Right, and he would have had to know that, exactly how much they ate every single day, because naturally he would have had to ration all that stuff out. And, as a farmer, we can tell you that rationing times, they come with the animal feed every now and then. Sometimes you can't afford to keep your animals fat. It's just a thing, So he would have had to know a lot. And of course, in that year that he would have had them, even if he would have never seen these animals before because they came from the other side of the planet, which we'll cover soon enough, he would have had plenty of time and plenty of proximity to those animals, presumably in cages, we imagine, to figure out how to work with them, how to breed them, and so on and so forth. So he had the opportunity to domesticate every single animal that we have since domesticated. He did not. He dropped the ball. He's either an idiot or it didn't happen, because plenty of those animals are very much intuitive. Any old idiot, if they had it in a cage already, could domesticate it. Okay. Well, PhD Tony said something.
PhD Tony offers $5 Australian, says koalas only eat fresh eucalyptus leaves. Not that easy to come by in the Middle East. I know, right?
Yeah,
but then look what lions and tigers and leopards eat. Right? Look at the amount of meat they have to eat daily. Now imagine that you've got a bunch of these things for a year. Now, you have ancient Egyptian artifacts that show domesticated cats. Right? These are just feline pets. Oh, yeah. And you have depictions of lions and you have depictions of leopards all the year that the ark should have landed, according to answers in Genesis and people like that. So
and
it already had this huge diversification of cats. So we had to have all those cats, to say nothing of all the different hyenas and wolves and mongooses and every other kind of carnivore there is. The fuck are they eating for that year?
Exactly. So then we come to point number 3, and this is our favorite point. Now, there are plenty of other points that are just as good and just as damning against Noah, but this is our personal favorite because it has what animal? If you were to take a guess right now, what animal do you think would single-handedly demolish Noah and the flood? Like we do not need any other animal other than this one. Period. Like we could end it right there. We're not gonna, but which one do you think it would be?
Well, that depends on how many different species of sauropods the creationists believe Noah had on the ark.
Oh, we're just talking about domesticates here. Things that we have domesticated.
What? I saw Fred Flintstone using one of these things in his quarry.
Well, fair enough. I mean, there's a lot of episodes of the Flintstones, and that's a lot of evidence, right? Since the Bible is evidence of God, the Flintstones is evidence for sauropod domestication. We got Ray Uchiha. How did he feed the insect eaters? That's another beautiful question because he didn't take anything with the breath of life, allegedly. So
yeah. How many ants were involved? Just not just for the conventional anteaters, the xenarthrans, but also the aphrotheres, like the aardvarks.
Yeah, the aardvarks.
And then there's another one, a Laurasiatherian, and that's the pangolins. So all 3 of these are eating ants exclusively. Where the fuck are the ants all coming from?
That's a great question. Tomas Sucheki. Sorry if we screwed that up. Am I remembering wrong? Didn't he have to storehouse and build the ark in 7 days? He did, didn't he?
I don't think he had 7 days. I can't remember if there was a time limit. I think the Bible was really vague on that.
Was there? We thought it was like an inordinately short amount of time or something like that. Anyway, moving on. So this is our favorite one. The animal, by the way, and this is going to blow your mind, is the guinea pig. some animals were already domesticated when the flood happened that Noah did not keep for his society after the waters receded, which he presumably set free to go on and live with people that would have been alive on the other side of the globe. For example, the Fuegian dog and the guinea pig. Those were both in Peru at the time of the flood. This guinea pig, guinea pigs, they don't swim. So this guinea pig would have had to have done one of two things. It would have had to go the Pacific route. So it had to go across the Pacific, presumably on a raft or an ark, maybe, of its own. And then it would have had to float over into Southeast Asia, cross over all those islands, and then go across the Indian Ocean, and then into the Middle East from there, presumably somewhere. And then, or alternatively, it would have had to go north into North America and then cross across the Atlantic, and that's probably even worse trip. And then it would have had to go, in that trip, it would have had to go across all of the Mississippi, river basin, and that's hilarious and horrible for a little guinea pig to get across. And then, of course, it would have had to go across Europe to get to the Middle East, and that's just as bad as the Mississippi River basin to go across for a little guinea pig. So then, because the guinea pig was domesticated in 5000 BCE by the Peruvians, so it was already domesticated for 1500 years by the time that Noah's flood happened. And then Noah had this domesticated animal on his ship in a cage, presumably, breeding like wild. They put out over 400 pounds of meat per year. He would have actually had to have undergone culling campaigns to keep these guinea pigs from overbreeding.
Oh, no. When you've got all those lions and tigers and bears.
The lions, right. And so, during that time, any old caveman could have been like, these guinea pigs, they're doing their job pretty well with pretty little.
We never even considered, what did Noah eat?
Yeah, what did Noah eat? Yeah. So then
the bigger question is, what did Noah breathe?
right. So
because
after
he's got all these animals enclosed in a box that has no ventilation. Now, all of the cargo carriers that carry live cargo, that carry
huge fans and.
Yeah, they've got like all these ships that are about the size of Noah's Ark will have like 14 giant tunnels that have these huge fans running so that they can keep the ventilation, so that they can keep roughly the same amount of animals in terms of like sheep, for standard number. And so you have to have all of this ventilation. But what you had with Noah's Ark is you had 8 people assuming that they had snow shovels, to shovel all the shit out one ladder through one hole in the top. Everybody would have died of methane poisoning on the first fucking day.
Oh man, we'll do you one better. We got like 70 rabbits right now out in the barn. And the barn's closed up most of the time because, you want to keep it cool when it's hot and you want to keep it warm when it's cold. So, we got like 70 rabbits out in the barn, and if you do not have a fan going out the window or whatever in there, it will choke you out. so and that's just 70 rabbits, man. What was he doing with the cows in there? He had like what 7 pairs of cattle or whatever, and oh geez, that's the smell.
To say nothing again of the sauropods.
Exactly. So
and why would it be? Why would it be that God made this promise that it's not up to Noah to provide all these animals for the ark? Because you could have had an out right there that Noah simply was being a human, fallible human. He couldn't get all the animals on the ark. God took it upon himself that he would bring all the animals before Noah. So all of these young earth creationists, reality denialists who want to pretend that all these dinosaurs were on the ark and everything else, because there's a hell of a lot more in the fossil record than just dinosaurs. So it's stunning amount of animals that God would have had to have brought forth only for everything, for 99% of all life to go extinct as soon as it got off the ark.
Well, and it's hilarious to think, it's not even like Noah invented the boat. It's not like he designed the boat. God gave him the measurements for the boat. He told him exactly how long it should be, and exactly how tall it should be, and exactly how wide it should be. So, that's the big man's own fault. So he had pre-domesticated animals. He had guinea pigs, he had reindeer, he had Fuegian dogs on the ark, and then he let them go, presumably off to a people who were all dead. Who had all died.
Maybe I'm getting my stories confused, but if Noah had reindeer, then why did he have to send out a raven and a dove? He could have just sent one of the reindeer to fly out into the...
Right, because this is a magical story tale, so it makes as much sense as anything else. So, and we understand...
Hold on a second. Vandalia 1998 offers $5. It says, even when I was still a Christian, it confused me how the flood that reset humans happened 8,000 years after Native Americans crossed the land bridge. I know, right?
Man, super weird, yeah. So and even if we can understand, okay, maybe the Middle East isn't great for a reindeer, maybe the reindeer didn't suit his purposes, even though riding reindeer is fucking awesome. Oh, sure, okay, he had to send those, but the guinea pigs, man, come on, at least the guinea pigs. I mean, those things just pump them out. There's good food right there, easy to keep in. No one must be an idiot to let them go. So he had domesticated animals already, and he let them go to people who were presumably not there, at least from Noah's perspective. Did he just okay, guinea pigs, it's been a great year with you, but now you can go swim off across the Pacific and go off to that Peruvian culture that God just destroyed a year ago. Because he didn't want to keep them for himself, we guess. So then next we move on to another pretty damning one here. Many animals, this is point number 4, many animals that Noah had on the ark were only domesticated mere centuries or even decades or less later after the alleged time of the flood, and some were domesticated around the time of the flood, so we should expect to see them in the Middle East, not in Tibet like the yak, or in Peru like the guanaco or the vicuña, or in West Africa like the guinea fowl. All of those would go on to be domesticated at about the time of the flood or just shortly thereafter. But for whatever reason, Noah was all like, nah, man, somebody else, one of my descendants, in 10 years can do this for me or whatever. So bro, why didn't... Again, we suppose we can understand why you wouldn't keep the yak, why you might send that on its way. It's the Middle East, it's a little bad. But the guinea fowl, man, the guinea fowls eat snakes. Snakes are all over the Middle East. Why don't you keep that around? That's a utilitarian animal for your chickens that will admit that you... I'm
about to do a video on, because I just did one on the evolution of snakes from a biblical perspective. But what I didn't cover, and that I'm about to cover...
That was a good video, by the way.
In the next video, is how long would it take for 2 snakes to populate, say, North America?
What historians sometimes colloquially refer to as a long ass time.
All right, so Beta Ray says the Bible says Noah was alive during the life of Abraham alive during the life of Moses, showing the entire Egyptian civilization was built in less than 50 years and almost 1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we don't do a lot of math in creationism, apparently.
No, creation math. So then we'll move on.
This idiot creationist, the one who calls himself Science and Reason because he's just an idiot troll. I would love to get somebody like this, somebody who has accountability, somebody who has like a face and a name. Not somebody hiding behind an anonym or something like that, but just to show some accountability for the things that when they say that the fossil record supports Noah's flood, there's so many different ways to prove that wrong. But how do you get somebody to show accountability? In Kitzmüller versus Dover, they had somebody with a face and a name. They put him on the stand, and he makes his prediction. He says science will never explain this. And so right away they hand him 50 fucking books, 50 books explaining that had already been published. And the thing is that every one of Michael Behe's arguments that he brought up on the stand, every one of them, he knew already. Michael Behe already knew that they had been disproved by science. They had been disproved by Kenneth Miller specifically before the case was even filed.
Thus the intelligent design proponent insists, because it was already turned down from creationism. So he definitely knew, yeah. So so then we'll move on to point 5. This is where it starts getting a little weird, a little esoteric. We're going to have to, if people in the chat will, stretch your brain meats a little to get on this, because now we're going into some things that are were domesticated considerably later or even into the modern era. But again...
Hold on. Beta Ray says he ran out of space. Shut Up! Shut up! I'm broadcasting. Stop it. Okay. Beta Ray says, ran out of space. About 1 billion people born less than 100 years from the flood, and all the Hebrews by the millions went to Egypt to be imprisoned.
Yep.
Yeah.
They would have just walked there. Same with all the animals at the Ark.
Elsewhere in this series, I cover how there's no kind of math for young Earth creationism. There's just nothing that works out.
No.
If they want to justify the number of people that it took to build the first of the Egyptian pyramids, they have to have a population growth system that would exceed what we currently have within one generation of that first pyramid.
Yeah, no, it would be, as you say, hyper caffeinated, turbocharged evolution.
Electro mega.
Yeah, super hyper mega evolution and breeding power. Although we will say they must have lived in a much happier and more exciting time. With how quickly everybody would have to
99% of all life go extinct.
Yeah. So then we gotta get a little weirder because we're getting closer to the modern day here. Many modern domesticates and semi-domesticates are considerably more productive than their ancient agrarian counterparts would have been at the time. For example, the cow back in the time that Noah allegedly lived only would have put about a gallon a day of milk. Now, if we look to a modern domesticate that Noah would have had access to, the common eland from South Africa, they live in a very similar climate to the Middle East, so they would not have a problem doing things. They're much larger than the average cattle would have been at the time. And they produce about a gallon of milk a day. The difference is that their milk at room temperature lasts for like 30 days. It just doesn't go bad or curdle or at least it takes that long to curdle before it goes bad, before you cannot drink anymore. So Noah would have had this animal that is better than a cow, or at least was better than his cow. It's not better than our cows, but it's better than his cows, and he decided to let it go. Not only that, but it would have been strong enough for him to ride, appropriately shaped for him to ride. It had antlers, or horns, rather. So, I mean, it's a better animal.
So it comes with a set of handlebars.
Yeah, so it comes with a set of handlebars. It's just an overall superior, more productive animal than the cattle, than the modern, or than the classical domesticates than he would have had at the time, and he let it get away. More than that, we'll notice, for example, that hyenas and cheetahs, specifically the striped hyena. If the striped hyena is raised up by a human being, like a dog, given a fair hand, it will invariably grow up to be domesticated. We are finding more and more in zoos in this day and age that striped hyenas lend themselves very well to domestication. The same goes for cheetahs. Cheetahs are very friendly. They do not in the wild see humans as prey, and so that means they interact with humans fairly benignly and are easy to get along with. So he kept dogs, and don't get us wrong, dogs are great, but do you know how powerful a hyena is? Like how powerful their jaws are, like more useful animal to him at the time. And then, of course, elephants versus horses, need we go on?
Well, how many elephants would he have had at that time? Because, proboscideans, right now, today, we have 2 different species of African elephant and a third species of Indian elephant, but the fossil record is full of proboscideans.
Well, we'll assume that he had to at least have a basal version of an African elephant and a basal version of an Asian elephant. Because
you've got mammoths, you've got mastodons.
We're about to get there, yeah.
without mammoths and mastodons, which are distinctly different things, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
These are not to be confused with regular elephants.
And as we recall, the Asian elephant is more closely related to the mastodon than to the African elephant. But
you also have other species of elephant, like that have 4 tusks.
Yeah, exactly.
Tetrasegmelodon. It had 2 tusks, but they were on the lower jaw, not the upper jaw, and it was a hell of a lot bigger than any elephant we have today. There was a couple of it, Tetralophodon, and then there was Platybelodon and a couple of others that had these huge
shovel mouths with a horrible, hideous existence.
Proboscideans are a hugely diverse group. I mean, they're vast. And so I was having a conversation with Gutsick Gibbon, where she explained that in doing the timeline that the creationists propose, so with the way that they want to believe in macroevolution, or what they accept as macroevolution, that was every single generation, because these animals live for 50 years.
Oh yeah,
they have a
or
very
longer.
long generational period. When you look at the details of the fossil record, which of course creationists don't know shit about the fossil record, they think they know of the few plastic pieces in the prehistoric playset to get at the grocery store. That's what they think the entire fossil record looks like.
And they all existed at the same time.
Yeah, but it's stunning how there's hundreds of species for each category of these things. They have no idea how vast the fossil record is. So with proboscideans alone, for the timeline from what we allege for the 24th century BCE for Noah, every single proboscidean generation would have to have produced a new species, every single one.
Yep. Well, so, and it's, we also have like weird ghost lineages in the proboscidean line that we just don't know about yet, that we haven't found any, but we know that they were there. Just like the ghost, because of how genetics lines up. So we know also that even more of them had to exist. And it's interesting that you mentioned proboscideans, because we have a fiction world that toys around with the idea of hyper-domestication, with a branch of humanity that long ago domesticated mammoths and other proboscideans, and what that would entail and how long that would take. And so
there would be just a moment, because I've got to catch up on these.
Yeah, definitely.
So Tomasz Shisheki, $1.99, says, sings Toss a Bone to Falkor to the Witcher tune.
Nice.
And I'll jump to another one. This is Torbjorn, love that name. Torbjorn Lindberg offers 50 Swedish kroner and says, another problem, especially with the take young ones advice, almost all animals need to learn many behaviors from their parents / pack.
Oh yeah.
It isn't innate. So I gotta, this calls to mind something else that I need to bring up in a moment as soon as I finish the chat. Maya Skill offers 200 Norwegian kroner and says, first time super chatter, long time viewer from Norway. I used to consider myself a Christian. Then I got online at about 18 and my mind was blown. How many Americans actually believe this all literally?
Right.
Yeah. How embarrassed am I? I was raised to believe this is the best damn country there is, and I don't need to know about nowhere else. That my father actually said that sentence to me.
Oh man!
So it's the best damn country as long as you're not aware of what other countries are like.
The other countries, yeah.
Farron Salas offers $4.99. It says, I would think that the tapeworms probably had the best scenario play out in the ark. A proper mix of hosts to propagate and ride out of the flood.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
parasites.
Parasites would have done swimmingly.
Beautiful pun.
Yeah.
And of course he would have had elephants. Elephants were only domesticated about 500 years later, semi-domesticated.
Which
about 500
elephants?
years
There's
later.
An awful lot to choose
the
from.
Asian elephant. We are talking about the Asian elephant here. So the Asian elephant was semi-domesticated only 500 years later. But Noah, who had this elephant here, he was all like, I could ride the horse, or alternatively, I could ride in style.
Have you ever seen a Stega tetrabelodon?
We actually mentioned that. Yeah, Stega tetrabelodon. Yeah, it's the big four
That's
boys.
like the Lord of the Rings elephants. You remember that?
That's our favorite proboscidean, actually. The Stega tetrabelodon is like 100%. No hands down. It's one of the largest proboscideans to ever live. It's got 4 gigantic man skewers. It's amazing. Love those.
That's a fucking elephant.
Yeah. So then we move on to number 6. Some modern or later occurring domesticates and semi-domesticates are considerably more pleasant to work with. In particular, we're thinking about stingless bees. That's the one of the arthropods we're not letting them get away with. Stingless bees. Noah was like, okay, so I got these bees that sting me and they're already domesticated, but I also got these stingless bees that are only going to be domesticated in like 200 years or whatever, but I'm just going to let those go because I don't know. I really want my kids to feel the burn. Or something. And then you have cormorants. Now Noah already showed considerable mastery of the bird kingdom, and yet he did not go on to use cormorants to go fishing. fishing, which would have been the best idea after the flood, we imagine. But and meanwhile, cormorants would then go on to be domesticated. Like thousands of years later, or something like that.
Yeah, I would have to walk away from
3,500 years later. That's what it was.
I would have to walk off camera for a couple of minutes, and it would be awkward to do that. So I'm not going to do that. But I mean, reticulated pythons in my lifetime. When I was a young man, if you wanted a reticulated python as a pet, you had to buy one that was wild caught in Thailand and then shipped overseas.
Yeah.
So that what you got in the States, the only option, and remember when I was in my 20s, the only option for a reticulated python was you got something that was trying to kill you.
Actively, at all times, yeah.
You got an apex predator that was capable of killing you, even if it couldn't eat you.
Yep.
And now, well, just a few generations later, we have reticulated pythons, apex predators that are adorable and affectionate house pets.
Stupid little serpentine puppers, yeah.
If you know how to raise them. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that long ago that the standard was, hey, it's not if you get bit, it's when you get bit with retics. That was the standard. But it's possible now to have these fucking snakes, these giant ass kill you snakes, in just a few generations of living in domestication with proper handling and breeding, that these animals will understand that, hey, that we're in a safe place, and these are not the food items.
And that is the power of animal husbandry. And it's hilarious that if again, Noah must have had some imparted knowledge or whatever to take care of all these animals for a year, yet he couldn't realize that some of these animals aren't like the reticulated python. They aren't actively trying to kill you at all times. They're actually, they lend themselves quite well to this, and he let that go away. He let the cormorant go away, even though the cormorant is already an animal that 100% wild can be grabbed up from the nest, and in the same generation you could have trained it to go fishing for you, raise children for you, and then raise those children to go fishing for you immediately. And it took him 3,500 years after the flood to do that. So it's really just not excusable. And then of course we have the silver fox problem. Silver foxes are a domesticated animal now. They were domesticated in the 20th century, and they were domesticated in like 50 years. And we know Noah lived longer than that after the flood. So why did he let those foxes go, considering that foxes are adorable?
Well, I know you want to be fair, and I would like to be able to steel man, but I still have to retract that the numeric system that was in use when they put together these stories was sexagesimal. It was not base 10. It was base 60.
Yeah.
And the way that it was translated was horrifically bad. So there's a tiny subtle marker. Now these are in cuneiform. These are in mud tablets. If you want to delineate the difference between 60, which is your base, you want to tone it down by 10 or up by 10, there's a certain mark that you have to put on. And these are in clay tablets. It's really difficult. It's really easy to miss this. So when they tried to transcribe the Sumerian king list, for example, they discovered this really serious problem. With the first few generations, these individuals are reigning for tens of thousands of years.
And we see the same thing in China with the old mythical rulers and everything, the Jade Emperor or whatever.
But we know that these people weren't actually living that long.
Yeah, the Jade Emperor, the first mythical emperor of the mythical nation of China before it actually became the world of China, which was just one small part of the actual world. He allegedly lived like 10 million years before he took a break. Before he took a break for like 30 million years, and then came back and reigned over Earth for like 160 million more years. And we're like, okay, bro,
let's refer for a moment to the Bhagavad Gita. I love the Bhagavad Gita when Lord Krishna, who said in 400 something BCE, and if you talk to Hindus, they'll say that it was a lot older. That I've argued with Bhakti Hindus that say that Lord Krishna said this 5,000 years ago.
Oh, but that's not very long for Hindus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not for Hindus.
Not for Hindus.
But contextually, they've pinpointed the Bhagavad Gita to 400 something BCE, so the 5th century BCE, when Lord Krishna said, "Oh, fuck, what was I just talking about? The dog was fucking making noise again."
In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna.
Oh yes, how Lord Krishna said that that the day of Brahma was 4,320,000,000 years, and that he, as the source of all the gods, that he, Krishna is somehow the source of even Brahma, that he created this day, and it's cyclic, so that everything that happens today or will happen has already happened before. That it's just a continuous cycle, but it goes on a 4,320,000,000 year cycle, and then when it comes to an end, he begins it all again.
Yep, yeah, that's when Shiva starts getting dancy and destroys the universe, and Brahma has to make it all over again. Yeah.
So when you think about the fact that the scientists, and the Bhakti love this, when scientists put a date on the age of the Earth at 4.6 billion years, I'm like, that's really close to what Lord Krishna said it was. Do you mind not constantly fucking barking at me? Stop that. I have to let this out. You take over for a moment.
Okay, so that covers the domesticates and semi-domesticates that are considerably more pleasant to work with. We've got ones that would have been more useful, much more productive at the time.
He was out for 1 second, one entire second, and he's pounding at the door to get let back in.
Oh, it's the
life's
cat dog dilemma.
Cannot be opening the door for you.
Of course it is. What are you talking about? What else could it be? So to recap real quick, Noah had every animal that we've ever domesticated since, but he didn't. Some of the animals were already domesticated, and he just let them go, presumably to people that he assumed were all dead. Many animals on the ark were domesticated very soon thereafter, but he chose not to, and you would expect those animals to be in his area since they were domesticated around that time, but they weren't. They were all the way on the other side of the world. Many domesticates and semi-domesticates are much more productive or better for what he was doing at the time. So the Elon versus the cattle, domestic dog versus the hyena. Oh, the ostrich versus the chicken. Chickens at that time would have only about had 100 to 120 eggs a year. The ostrich, funny enough, has about 100 eggs a year. So he had ostriches. Why didn't he keep an animal that laid just as many eggs, but each one of those eggs was 24 chicken eggs? Why didn't he do that?
He had moa.
Oh, yeah.
He had elephant birds.
Elephant birds, yeah. Absolutely. Why didn't he keep those things around? They would have been way more productive than the chicken. So, and of course, then there were ones that were more pleasant, stingless bees, cormorants, silver foxes. And foxes are important because a fox bite is considerably less gnarly than a wolf bite. So way easier to domesticate, way more pleasant.
You have heard, of course, of the domestication of foxes, the Russian experiment in the 1950s.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. We're specifically talking about those guys. Okay. So now we get on to point number 7, and here's where it really all just starts falling apart. For Noah, some animals on the ark would have been so painfully easy to domesticate that Noah would have actually had to actively kill and eat them to keep the populations down, and yet he didn't put it together. And now here's where we get to our favorites, the rabbits. Now that's our home turf. We already said, we got 70 rabbits in the thing. We started with 2 rabbits. This is a year and a half later, and now we've pumped through tons of rabbits. 2 rabbits can produce 600 pounds of meat a year. 2 guinea pigs can produce 400 pounds of meat a year just by their offspring.
That's depending on the tonnage of food they have to eat.
We'll assume that he's feeding them or whatever. And then of course that doesn't include quails, muscovy ducks, and turkeys, all of which would be domesticated later on for their fecundity, as well as Roman snails. All of these things are small enough, don't range or go fast enough, they're stupid enough, and they reproduce fast enough that assuming that he was feeding them even their minimum acceptable diet, they would have been overflowing out of the ark throughout the entire year. He would not be able to kill them fast enough. He would have had to have started feeding them to the lions. And again, all of these animals are things that, in some cases, for example, the rabbit was only domesticated 1,000 years ago. Oh, pardon, 1,000 years ago. He saw that the rabbit was so good for domestication that he let it go, and then 2,500 years later, the Romans domesticated the European polecat, which Noah also had on the ark, into ferrets to hunt rabbits, which they would then go on to domesticate 1,000 years later. So Noah really dropping the ball on the rabbit train here. Probably worse than everything except for the guinea pigs, because my God, man, they're not hard. They're rabbits. You put two of them in a cage and they'll make more of themselves all year long.
If you have the food and water.
Yeah.
So how much water are they? How much fresh water are they going to? Because the young Earth creationists say, well, there was a lot of rain, so that it would stave off the salinity.
Oh man,
but we know that's not the case.
Do you know? No. Do you know how much rain it was? Have you actually done the math?
In my first video on this, it was an impossibly stupid number.
We're talking like an amount of water downpour that would have turned the ark into, it would have like torn it up like spun sugar, man. It would have just completely ripped it to shreds, like the rate of rain that we would have had. So and then of course, Roman snails, that's the other arthropod that we're not going to let them get away with. Roman snails were gigantic. The Romans mastered them. They were, the cochleus was just, you could get like a 1 pound snail. And these things would breed by the thousands every year. So, I mean, and they eat sludge. They eat, sludge on the side of the ark. So we're not asking much here, bro. It's real easy. So then we'll move on to number 8. This is a more.
And we have to throw in that Noah didn't know that whales have the breath of life.
No, they were Cindy fish.
He didn't know that tylopods, that mosasaurs and elasmosaurs or plesiosaurs or ichthyosaurs, that any of these had the breath of life. He had no idea.
Well, he also didn't know that beavers or otters or anything like that had the breath of life. Those were all fish, according to the Christians, too. That's why Catholics can eat them on Friday. Yeah, no, that's a big thing. That's a huge historical factor. A beaver is a fish. You could eat it on Friday. It was totally allowed. It was not meat. It's not an animal of the land. So yeah, it includes otters and beavers and stuff. And oh man, yeah. So then we get to point 7, point 8. Some animals would have just been cooler to domesticate than, now that we've domesticated them now. And Noah totally had the opportunity to do so, but dropped the ball. He cursed all of us to a more boring history because he did not domesticate cheetahs, moose, emus, ostriches, Fuegian dogs, kangaroos, and raptors. All, and that we can also probably include corvids and parrots there. He would have had all of those animals on the thing. We know all of those animals lend themselves to domestication. The Fuegian dog was already domesticated. It's a dog that's derived from a fox. So we had all of those things. And, we've had kangaroos. That would have been awesome to have European kangaroos being their main meat thing. With plenty of things that would have been so much cooler to have. Like, could you imagine people going to war on moose? With their cheetah animal companions going to, that would have been way cooler, Noah. You're letting us down. You're letting the whole world down, Noah. And of course, he showed him a mastery of the ability to train birds, but he didn't keep corvids. He didn't keep any of the raptors. He didn't keep hawks, eagles, falcons, none of those things that would 3,500 years later on go on to be used by
the bearded vulture, a personal favorite of mine. I would have loved to have had a bearded fucking vulture. And I've known people who have kept vultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, vultures are extremely intelligent animals. He would have known. And
they're so easy to feed. Hamburger.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Just any old meat will do. And it doesn't even have to be good meat. It can be the bladder. It can be all the things that Noah wouldn't have wanted to eat anyway. And of course, then we have the moose, we have emus, and we'll always talk. It's funny because we really want emus, and you are one of the excuses that we use for why we should get an emu. You, R and Raw, are the one, because every time you bring up the emu that you had as a kid growing up, you always, every single time we've seen you do it, you look at the camera and you go, I loved that bird. I love that bird so much. It seems like you really, it was a good time. We want an emu now because of you. So, you know.
I did.
Yeah.
It broke my heart when the city told me that I had to put a leash on him. I'm like, are you kidding me?
How can you
How
even?
the fuck do you put a leash on a 6-foot long-necked bird?
Well, how do you keep a collar on a 6-foot long neck bird? Wouldn't it just like duck and like swooch itself right out and wiggle out of it like a worm?
The thing is, for anybody who doesn't know, I had a bird in my backyard who was 6'6" tall, and I would walk him to the park twice a week, and it's just a couple blocks down. But he and I would walk casually down the sidewalk,
right?
And unless it was a huge loud vehicle that would come by, that would spook him. You know, he'd be fine. He'd be able to walk all the way down to the park. We would get to cross the street before the park. I'd put my hand out in front of him, stop him at his sternum. I'm checking to make sure it's okay. We would walk across the street. Then once his feet hit the grass, his head would do this weird ass thing, and he'd gone 40 miles an hour. So I had learned to bring a bicycle with me, not to keep up, because you can't keep up, but to catch up. Yeah. So he would do that one thing. He would just like take off at 40 miles an hour, and it's a stunning sight to see when he hits second gear, when he hits full on speed. But then I would catch up to him with the bicycle, and we would spend the next hour or so just milling about the park casually.
Yeah.
And he enjoyed it. He used to like to get down in the creek and swim.
Yeah.
And emu swimming is a bizarre. It looks like the
Loch Ness Monster. We hear that emus actually really love swimming.
Some Australians that I've talked to thought that was an alien concept.
Huh.
But I really loved having this bird, and the city and my neighbors. My neighbors were fucking dickheads, and they complained that I had this bird illegally. Admitted I had the bird illegally, and eventually the city shows up and says, you know, we've known you've had this thing for years, but there is a statute against ratites, and your neighbors complain all the fucking time.
Because fuck them.
Well, this one neighbor.
Yeah,
complained all the fucking. You know how that works. So
yeah, we do actually.
I ended up having to turn my emu over to a petting zoo nearby, and sadly, my daughter went to go visit the bird, and they'd informed her that it had just been torn apart by coyotes.
Oh my god!
They put it in a pen where it doesn't matter if you can. It doesn't matter if you can run faster than a dog. It doesn't matter what you can kick like, not when there's a pack of fucking coyotes and you're in a pen.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons that we're all about free ranging on this farm, is because, you know, the lynx is going to try to attack the birds anyway, but, you know, alternatively, you can give them the chance to run away, or you can keep them in the pen where the lynx will just, you know, climb up the fence and then go down and kill all of them and take one and see if he was hungry after that one and come back for any remaining, because we've seen him do it. He's killed like 8 of them.
I took my emu to the park, and there was a big, like somebody had like a company picnic or something. I don't know what the deal was, but there's a whole bunch of people for a picnic. And I saw the animal control truck coming because somebody had called, because at one point I got reported because there were children trying to play with my bird. They would like run up and do these scare motions at it, and then the bird would chase them, and they'd chase back. And the bird is obviously playing games,
having a good time,
as are the children. I mean, if you're aware, if you're just watching, they're all playing with each other, and it's all good. But somebody called to the city to say that an eagle was attacking children.
Like a Haast's eagle, like a literal.
How do you confuse an emu?
Wide,
How do you confuse an emu with an eagle? But
that's what we're saying. It's like, you know, an emu is like 6.5 feet tall. What is this? A Haast's eagle? Like a 16-foot wide like monster that hunts giant birds? Like what kind of eagle are you talking about?
A bunch of people came up to me and says, "Oh, when I'm in the park with my emu, they're like, oh, you brought a bird out here and you don't have it on a leash." I'm like, "Well, how would I want to put a leash on it?" And said, "Well, aren't you afraid it's going to fly away?"
It's a 6.5-foot tall bird. What's going on?
Like, this thing wouldn't fly if you strapped a propeller to it.
Right? I got a jetpack in the back. We might test it on the thing, but no.
So I brought this thing to the park, and I see the animal control truck coming. I know he's looking for my bird. Somebody's called the animal control again.
Oh, right.
So I have to go hide him in the picnic. And so somebody
God.
threw a blanket over him. And I got him to sit down, and somebody threw a blanket over him. And we're just all sitting there calmly so that the truck doesn't notice the bird that I'm petting as he's driving through the park looking for this thing.
Just thinking of a teenage Aaron Rawl just like throwing a blanket over this bird, and this bird's like, oh. And the animal control truck goes by, looks over, you're like, hey, and there's just this standing like tablecloth ghost or whatever rolling around.
But I did sincerely.
He was like, I'm gonna let you go this time.
I did sincerely love that bird. It was not smart. Their eyeball is bigger than their brain. He would never be able to figure out that painted toenails were not actually berries.
Just like chickens, yeah. No, so it's the same way with all birds.
Just dumb. But the thing is that with birds, as in with other reptiles, because birds technically are reptiles, if as long as you show it kindness consistently, and it knows that if you've never wronged the bird, or the same thing goes with reptiles. If the reptile has established a level of trust with you that it's never been violated, that's what's important.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how intelligent the thing is. It knows that because they will build up a list of times that you have violated their trust.
Right. No.
And then it's just like your relationships. When you fuck up this time, you will be reminded of when you fucked up 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, because with any animals, it's just it's the amount of pleasant memories versus the amount of unpleasant memories. Because animals have memories, they're fuzzier than ours, but it's the amount of pleasant experiences versus the amount of unpleasant experiences. The reason that we can free range our animals and they will always come back to us when we whistle for them is because they know they have 1.5 million experiences, if they've got even a couple, of when we whistle, that's food time. That's a good time. That's a pleasant experience. You always come when people are whistling. So and it counts with everything from freaking iguanas to crows.
And then some people want to think about think about discipline, like training an animal. That's not the way to go. The way is to just make sure that whenever you reach in to take the animal, however you've trained it, to know the difference between feeding time and handling time, whatever, that animal knows that this is not going to be an ordeal, that everything's going to be fine and it's not going to get hurt because you've done it 100 times already. And it's always been okay. And then you always come home and you're always safe. Eventually they will establish that pattern.
Yeah. Well, and we're reminded of, and a lot of animals, you can slip every now and then. So we've got a cat, Dusty, and he's a good cat, but he does that typical cat thing where he'll stop right in front of you and try to trip you and roll over on top of your feet as you're walking. And we have a log bridge. So he did that to us once. And we almost tripped and fell into the creek. So instead, we shoveled him off of the log bridge into the creek. And he's still a totally lovable, delightful animal that'll come up. It's just, now he won't try to trip us on the log bridge because he knows, like, we bear him no ill will, but you're not following the rules on our end. And animals are surprisingly understanding about that.
I have in my snake collection, of course, I've got the retic, which has the capacity to be big enough to kill me.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to have that bad day that I've seen so many videos of other people having a bad day with their retic. I want to make sure that I've seen a lot of people that have nothing but wonderful experiences with theirs, but they understand what the responsibilities are and how to manage that and how to get the snake conditioned so that the snake never has to fear.
Yeah, it is still a wild animal, like in its core,
I've got a couple of snakes behind me that are large and mildly venomous, but the bite is medically significant. If I were to get bit, I've never been bit.
Right.
But my snakes know that if I take them out, that it's not going to be an ordeal, that they're not under threat, that
Yeah.
they're going to come home again and it'll all be cool.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So finally, we suppose that brings us getting back on track here to our last point, our ninth point. And this one really hammers home. All of the others have been from like a domestication perspective. This would have been easier. This would have been, more pleasant to deal with. This would have been more productive. This would have been more useful to him at the time. But this particular one has to do more with the history of daily life in history, with how Noah would have lived. And now we grew up doing living history stuff, so we actually know quite a lot about daily life in history. That's our historical specialty. So we know how Noah would have lived, what Noah would have done with his day, how he would have made his cloth, etc., etc. So the last one, finally, some animals would have been useful to Noah at that time, and their byproducts would have been easier to harvest, use, and make finished products out of than the animals he would have already had. Now, we have a whole score of them here, but the first ones we want to go for are guanacos and vicuñas, which would go on to be alpacas and llamas, respectively. We might be getting them the other way around, but those two ones became llamas and alpacas. So a lot of people don't know, but alpaca cloth and llama cloth is very different from sheep's wool cloth and cotton cloth. Cotton and sheep's wool, the things that Noah would have been working with, and maybe like goat hair, you have to spin it into yarn and you have to weave it. You do not have to do that with alpaca or llama fleece. With alpaca and llama fleece, you start out the same way you do with goats and sheep. You shear the animal, you take the fleece, you wash it, you comb it, you get all the stuff out of it, you dry it out. That's where the similarities stop, because from there, with wool, with sheep wool or goat hair, you have to spin it into yarn, you have to weave that yarn into fabric, you have to treat that fabric, usually with human urine, to fluff it up and moisturize the strands and so on and so forth, make it all nice and soft. And then you have to treat it again, usually with some kind of soapy wood ash solution or what have you, to get all the bugs and nasties out of it. So that's not how llama or alpaca fabric works. Instead, once you get it all dry and brushed out and everything, you just take a giant rolling pin and you roll it over it until it's more or less a consistently thick, long, piece of fabric, and that's your fabric. The process for it's called felting. It's extremely easy by comparison of what people were doing in the old world at the time, and Noah's wife and the wives of his sons would have thanked him dearly to keep those guanacos and vicuñas in the old world, but he didn't. Alas, he let them go, and then they made a red eye, presumably over to Peru, where they were domesticated just weeks later by the Peruvians, who didn't even seem to notice that the entire world was covered with water.
Funny thing, how many of these ancient cultures rudely refused to acknowledge that they had all drowned?
What? And we're having to wonder about like the vicuña, which was actively going through domestication, and the guinea pig and the Fuegian dog, which were both domesticated at that point. Did the Peruvians like, all right, so we're gonna make a little boat and we're gonna send all of these animals that are supposed to be going to this fancy ark off in a very far away land. We're gonna just push it out into the Pacific Ocean, and we've done our part. God will sort the rest out.
So how old is the city of Machu Picchu?
Old enough.
So just imagine the people who live in Machu Picchu. You're going to tell them the story. Well, you need to ship over your animals because the world is going to flood. You're going to flood. We're at what, 8,000 foot altitude?
Right, exactly.
We're gonna flood.
Buddy.
What?
You're gonna say the water is gonna come all the way up here? Color me unconvinced. So then, in one of our in Tom Mondo, our big fantasy world that we've got going right now, the eland makes a feature in that, but also the kudu, the greater kudu, which is being domesticated today. It's a modern domesticate. As it just so happens, the greater kudu also gives plenty of milk. It gives a lot of meat. It gives perfectly good pelt. And unlike a lot of the domesticates that would have served the same role at the time of Noah's Ark, the kudu has.
I'll tell you, when I was in South Africa, I ate kudu or springbok every single day that I was there.
Is it good? We've always wanted to try it.
Well, I've had it. I had it in the form of biltong.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that like a stew
I
or?
I never had biltong before, and I loved it as soon as I got it.
Oh my
I have a
goodness.
friend in South Africa, or a friend from South Africa who lives in the States now, who's trying to show me how to make biltong, because it's like jerky, but it's a different thing.
Yeah. And so, since we started putting Kudu and Alond into Talmondo into our big wide fantasy world, which is supposed to have a lot of historical accuracy into it, since we started putting them, we've really wanted them because nobody knows this about us. This is kind of a little known fact. We love eating different types of animals. We're like a regular Charles Darwin over here. We consider it a good day when we've gotten to eat a new type of animal, like that we've never eaten before. So,
I was in Brisbane for a week.
yeah.
And I had barbecued roux every single day because I
We've
knew.
had kangaroo. Kangaroo's good.
I knew that it was always wild caught. It was never farm raised.
Yeah.
But I had barbecued roux every day, because when the hell else am I ever going to get roux again?
Yeah,
and it was
hard
good.
to find, yeah.
I mean, it really, I didn't need special spices or seasonings or anything. Just right off the grill, that was really good. And people would ask me, well, what does barbecue kangaroo taste like? And I'm like, it's a lot like alligator. And then people would get confused.
We like alligator. We've had alligator before. We've had kangaroo. We like to think of kangaroo as the opposite of camel. Camel has no flavor, and it doesn't matter what you do with it. It never gets any flavor. It is just this super bland meat. Our mom put it in chili, and she doesn't skimp with the chili. And so we're eating this chili, and there's just nuggets of flavorlessness in this like festival of chili. And we're over here like, how does camel do that? And so kangaroo is the opposite. Kangaroo is the one that it's seasoned itself. It just eats wild herbs all the fucking time. So it's eating all of the sage and everything or whatever. That
it really is a good flavor without having to season it at all. It's really a natural flavor. Now when I have beef, which beef is famously a really good flavor, I season the fuck out of it. We make a marinade that'll turn it nuclear.
Nice.
I mean, we do a ghost pepper or scorpion pepper marinade that it'll make it radioactive.
Nice.
But it's always a good flavor. It's hard for me to imagine something that can't be.
So we're glad you know what kudus are. So you know what a kudu looks like. It's got a big fat pair of 3
I've encountered them in the wild.
Yeah. So they've got these 3-foot long spikes on their head. So they would literally be able to do almost everything a cattle would do, but they would have these giant spikes on its head, which, you know, at the time, the Middle East was considerably more dangerous than it is now. There were a lot more wild animals that could kill things, and you know, maybe that would be good. Then we have the Bactrian camel. Noah does not get an excuse here. It was first domesticated 100 years later in Afghanistan, so you know, just a few hundred miles away from where Noah dropped off. It was in the Middle East. He could have used it.
And what year have you chosen for the flood? Is it the
2500? 2500.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, you know, the camel was domesticated just 100 or 200 years later. He really had no excuses whatsoever. He really should have just kept that damn thing. Then the Egyptian mongoose. The Egyptian mongoose was domesticated about that time. It was domesticated by the Egyptians for pest control. As Noah was setting up society again, presumably putting out wheat and stuff, he probably could have used that mongoose. Same thing goes for skunks and European polecats. Skunks were domesticated in the 1700s by American farmers for pest control, and it worked for quite well. And the Romans would go on to domesticate the European polecat 2,500 years later to catch rabbits, which would go on to be domesticated 1,000 years later. So all of these things. Yeah,
when I was on this expedition in South Africa, Art, that we were in a farmhouse way out in the desert, out in the Karoo, and we would eat outdoors. The kitchen was outside of the house, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But we did all the cooking outside, and I remember that one morning there was a mongoose in the sink.
Oh yeah. It's a recessed area. It's a little raised up, so things can't see it right away. Yeah, and they're totally.
I'm going to read another chat. We got Ready Steady offers $10 and said, if you see Nike mud footprints in your house, you know someone walked there. If you saw those footprints, would you be exactly as sure of that as you are about evolution? What? If you
We
saw
mean-
Nike mud footprints in your house, you would know someone walked there. If you saw those footprints, would you be exactly as sure of that as you are about evolution? Yes,
Yes, yeah,
for the
especially if
same
they were
reason.
specifically Nikes, because they would have the swoosh. We mean,
Wait. I've used this
metaphor,
example
bro.
myself. You know, if you have a doctrine that tells you that this island has never been visited by people, and for whatever reason you are required to believe that this island has never been visited by people, and then you go there yourself, right? You've come at the appointed time, and when you get there, you see boot prints, cleated boot prints on the beach. Do you accept that somebody has been there, or do
Yeah.
you believe the storybook that says that no one has been there?
Yeah,
That's the thing. Do you accept the facts, or do you accept the authoritarian dictate?
yeah.
Yes, I can prove evolution to Ready Steady, even to Ready Steady's. If Ready Steady is some kind of creationist, which because it looks like it is, then yeah, I can prove evolution even to your satisfaction.
Yeah,
Easily.
and we're pretty much the same way. We can basically prove the same thing from basic survivalism, outdoorsmanship, bushcraft, tracking skills. We can tell you what kind of animal took our chicken off into the woods. We can sure as hell tell you a Nike footprint, exactly what a Nike footprint looks like, and that of course that's all from experiential knowledge and skills that we have. You know, just based on practice as any specialist. So, and we think that's it. Yeah, that's our 9 points right there. And we think if you put all these 9 points together, you can pretty clearly put together that either Noah didn't exist or he was a profoundly idiotic boob who passed.
Speaking of
every
profoundly
opportunity.
idiotic, somebody just posted there is
Oh,
proof
dear.
of a flood. LOL.
Lol. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we saw somebody back in the thing be like, which of the 1,000 translations of the Bible is true? And we wanted to say none.
Yeah, and then they followed up. They said they said it's a proven fact. Yeah. I'm gonna say obvious troll there.
Well,
there's no way. There's no way this
he's
guy.
true. There is proof of a flood, but there
there's
definitely
several
isn't proof
floods.
of the flood. Yeah.
Yeah, there's proof of the flood of the Black Sea around 7,000 BCE. There's a proof of the flood of the Sea of Galilee around 15,000 BCE or 1500 BCE. I can't remember. But those are not and there was this inundation. I forget what was the island of Thera. There's a whole lot of different floods.
Oh, don't even forget,
times.
the 12,000 years ago or whatever, there was that central Inter-American Seaway flood or whatever that happened with the breaking of at the end of the last glacial maximum. That was definitely a flood of legit biblical proportions that would have absolutely eclipsed the Shurpak flood.
But it was biblical proportions only if you keep the proportions to the state of Washington.
Well, yeah, that's about as big as the flood would have been, right? Oh yeah, no. So for the record, we can read off our list here. We it's just a bunch of stuff. So our little list here to pass it off. So this is our list of 3 standouts that were.
Yeah, we do need a recap on this.
Yeah. So all in all, here are the list of animals that were already domesticated. That would be the Colpayan fox or the Fuegian dog, the reindeer and the guinea pig. Noah just let those guys go. They were already domesticated, and for whatever reason,
which is so useful. I mean, having a flying hooved animal like that would have been really useful.
Right. So then we have 14 standouts for just straight up fully domesticated entities. So we have wild yaks. They were domesticated with 100 years. Bactrian camels were domesticated within 100 years. Guanacos and vicuña 1 century later. Guinea fowl 1 century later. The European polecat was domesticated 2,500 years later by the Romans, as mentioned earlier. Muscovy duck almost 2,000 years later. The African collared dove was domesticated 2,000 years later. Turkeys 2,500 years after that, so about the same time as the European polecat, just in America. Then the Iberian rabbit over 3,500 years later. The American mink 4,200 years later. Hedgehogs 4,500 years later, and silver foxes 4,500 years later. Both of those in the fairly recent times. A lot of people don't know hedgehogs are only like 100 years domesticated. Not even, actually, we don't think. So then the semi-domesticated list is really fun because that's when we get like the things that would have really helped him. So we have the Asian elephant. Obviously Noah could have used some elephants around there. He had them. He should have used them. The scimitar horned oryx, similar reasons to why he should have gotten the kudu. Same general defense mechanism, same general analog. He has cheetahs. Those were, funny enough, cheetahs were only domesticated 1,000 years later. They were semi-domesticated by the Egyptians. The pharaohs and nobility would literally walk around with cheetahs like as their cats. And then it fell off when Rome was taken over, when Rome took over Egypt. So we actually
PhilosoShy? We lost PhilosoShy. That was abrupt, but at least it was during the recap.
Hey, you hear us? You hear us?
Yep, there you are. Okay, good. Finish your recap, please.
Yeah, where were we?
I have to confess I was arguing with an idiot in the chat.
Okay, so did we get past the scimitar horned oryx?
Yeah, no, we didn't. Hold on a second. Let me read. Ready Steady offers $20. Thank you very much for that. It says, no, I'm not a creationist. I love you. You're a genius. I'm weird about accepting compliments because I always feel imposter syndrome. Just wanted to hear you say it. You look exactly like my grandfather, RIP 2009. I wish he was still alive to have a beer with you because then he might not have stayed Christian. Thank you, Ready Steady. That's meaningful. All right, PhilosoShy. Tell me about this last one.
So we got over silver foxes, so semi-domesticates. The Asian elephant, obviously Noah could have used some elephants. We could all use some elephants. They were used for work. It would have been better than a cow, better than a horse at the time too. Then the scimitar horned oryx, probably useful. They're semi-domesticated. We're domesticating them now. They would have been useful because it was semi-domesticated just centuries later, and they share the same kind of analog as the kudu, giant horns, similar analog to a cow. Next is cheetahs. So cheetahs, fun fact, were only domesticated 1,000 years after the flood allegedly happened. Around 1500 BCE, the Egyptians, the nobility and the aristocracy, would actually raise cheetahs and wander around with them like cats. And adherents of Bastet, the Egyptian cat goddess, would actually. Yeah,
I know somebody. I know somebody who lives just a couple of miles from me, or I used to know somebody who lived a couple of miles from me who met her in person.
Oh, wow. That's very fancy. If it's any consolation, in our Saturday morning Pathfinder group, we're trying to convince the party cat boy to get married to one of her adherents. So, pretty cool. So, yeah, they actually like semi-domesticated cheetahs. Cheetahs are amazingly domesticable. They lend themselves very well. They do not view in the wild humans as food. So the Egyptians, just 1,000 years later, in 1500 BCE, were walking around with cheetahs, and that practice of domesticating and semi-domesticating the cheetah, you domesticate cheetahs just like you domesticate Cheetos. Oh man, no, we saw it.
We domesticate Cheetos?
Yeah, no. Torbjorn got us there. And then that practice would go on for like 1,500 years of domesticating cheetahs in Egypt until Rome took over. And then they stopped doing that. And that wasn't the thing you did anymore. So that was, again, Noah just dropping the ball there. Mandarin ducks, pre-modern China domestication time. The English.
You talk about Peking ducks?
No, we're talking. Peking ducks are a type of mallard duck. They're just like any other standard domestic duck, but the Mandarin duck is in a different genus. Okay. Yep. Funny, we never brought that up in our original duck talk. So then, the Egyptian mongoose, domesticated about that time. Too young to feel this old, since 666.
Thank you for reading that super chat for me.
Yep.
Just wanted to say thanks for helping me get out of religion, Aaron. Also, I'm finally reading Foundational Falsehoods, loving it so far.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for that.
Excellent. So then, the Egyptian mongoose domesticated around that time. The peafowl would be domesticated in India about 2,000 years later. And those, who doesn't want a good peacock in your yard? We sure Noah would have been able to wow his local neighbors and make them, show how much more, holy than thou he was. His neighbors being his like nieces and nephews. Um, and then European fallow deer, they were domesticated and semi-domesticated 1,500 years later, so 3,000 years ago. Red deer, domesticated 2,500 years later, so around 2,000 years ago. Stingless bees, 2,500 years later by the Mayans, so 2,000 years ago. Roman snails, 2,000 years ago by the Romans. Cormorants, about 1,000 years ago by medieval Europe. Quails, about 1,000 years ago by the Japanese. They one of those things. The Japanese were the ones that really got on the quail game super early. The common eland, that's modern times, as we mentioned. Noah would have been much better off having an eland than a cow. The eland milk lasts considerably longer. Moose was domesticated and has been domesticated. You can go to Northern Europe, find moose farms. Where they farm and milk moose. You can get moose milk from Scandinavia. You can actually order it online. So that's a
Mind
thing.
you, moose bites can be pretty nasty.
It can be pretty nasty. And having gone and worked in Alaska for a summer, we will gladly tell you we never want to face down a moose at any distance of any sort. Not only are they super cool animals, but they are the only animal in the world that can kick in 4 different directions all at the same time, or can kick one place with all 4 legs at the same time. so a moose is the only animal in the world that can kick you in the face with all 4 feet at once. We would rather fight a bear barehanded than take on a moose with a knife. At least we would stand a chance of winning. For real.
Okay.
So then ostriches and emus, those took until 20th century, 21st century to start really getting into. All of the raptors of falconry and owls, all of those are being, 3,500 years later, they've been used for 1,000 years, each and every single one of them, all of the raptors. Kangaroos, we started domesticating in the modern time, and we were just talking about how delicious kangaroo was earlier. So again, he really dropped the ball there. He's cursed us to a future of not having delicious food. And then, of course, the kudu, and then we've got striped hyenas and skunks. Because as we mentioned earlier, striped hyenas, if raised from birth, grow up exactly like dogs. They also raise their children to be exactly like dogs, if you carry that down. And skunks were domesticated in the 1700s by American farmers to keep rats out of their grain. And it worked really well. Not to mention, we also, of course, have parrots and corvids, both of which are highly intelligent, highly social, and language-developing animals. He could have easily figured out how to do those, especially with his aforementioned mastery of the bird kingdom. What with him being able to send birds off and all that.
As a parrot owner myself, I mean, yeah, they're really good with language. My parrot learned my name as soon as I adopted him, and he also learned that cats get attention when they meow.
So he meows. Yeah.
So he meows.
We've heard it in the background. Our first thing with you, we heard it in the background. We kept hearing him go meow, meow. And we're like, your cat wants attention. And you're like, no, that's my parrot. And we're like, oh, jeez. Yeah, we've heard him meowing in the background. Yeah, and we're so in Mutar, which is our hyper domestication setting, the parrots and corvids have specifically been domesticated for intelligence, which we talked about. The potential idea of domesticating something for intelligence in our last talk about dogs. So in Mutar, parrots and ravens, at least the domesticated types of parrots and ravens, can just talk to you. They can just carry on regular conversations and are intelligent enough to take directions. And the military uses them, but they don't give them training or whatever. They just send them off, and then the parrot will come back and just tell them what they saw. And so we like to think that, given a few 10,000 years or whatever of artificial selection, you might even be able to do that with a parrot or a raven.
One of my daughters is a scientist, and her dog has a keypad, so that the dog hits certain words on the keypad and it speaks those words.
Yeah,
dog.
Exactly.
And that's the breeding that I wish that we had done with dogs. Can you imagine if we'd done the last 10,000 years with breeding of dogs? And look at all the different traits that we breed with dogs, but we never bred dogs for just pure intelligence and communication.
And
But
it's
we
funny,
could.
we could.
And look how productive it could be in a short period of time.
And we recall, and I will never remember specifically when it was like 5 years ago, but some long-term study on animal communication or whatever, and all the on dogs, cats, dolphins, blah blah blah, elephants, so on and so forth. A really comprehensive study that we remember from like 5, maybe 10 years ago, and it was talking about how the introduction of more communication standards into a population invariably increases the amount of communication standards independently developed by that population.
Yeah.
So if you give, we're going to make an example of this, like a really clumsy example of metaphor. If you were to give dogs the chance to do that 3,000 years ago, somehow, if we had the technology to do that, by now, dogs, while they would not have developed different vocal cords that would have given them human communication, the presence of more options for communication may or may not have inspired them in that 2,000 year time to making new forms of communication of themselves, which leads into a feedback loop cascade effect of intelligence.
I also note that a lot of our communication problems are the fact that we are missing their physical social cues.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
The dogs. So you mentioned earlier that parrots have had these conversations. I've seen some stunningly, impressively intelligent parrots, but I've never been able to. I've never seen one that could carry on a conversation like what you described. But we know that dogs have the capacity to do that if they have the devices to do it.
If they have the devices,
and like the reason that we are able to make the intricate vocalizations that we do is because we have this tiny little cleft in our palate, that this itty bitty little space where chimpanzees have like a straight, kind of a straight line at the top of their palate. Ours is arched, and that it's that little difference,
very little bit,
that gives us the ability to make these noises that chimpanzees don't have. And so, in order for chimpanzees to communicate, they have to have the keyboards. And when there's an animal like Kwanzi, a bonobo, he has this vast array of keyboards. Or he has this keyboard for all these different words, and he can print out he can call out the words, and he can understand. Dolphins can understand English, parrots can understand English, and of course dogs can understand so many words out of English. It's stunning how other animals can understand our languages. We don't have the ability to understand how dolphins communicate with each other.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, we've
got to
fancy technologies and stuff for it. Yeah.
This is why I say that we're not the only sapient species on this planet.
Certainly.
We may have the advantage of being in one particular metric the smartest, but by one metric we certainly are.
Right. Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because not across the spectrum.
Right. Well,
I need
for
to read
example,
another super chat.
Oh yeah.
I have Maya Skill for 100 Norwegian kroner says the moose, Scandinavia's deadliest animal, purely by trying to chase off cars approaching. The moose survives that standoff. Usually the car does not.
And having spent the summer in Alaska about 10 years ago, 100% absolutely. Usually the car does not. Usually
I remember,
the car does not.
I lived in an alpine forest in Arizona, in a town called Alpine, Arizona, and I remember coming home from my job. It was in Springerville, Arizona. I come home into the alpine forest, and this huge bull elk walked out into the middle of the road and stared me down while his family passed behind him, and he never lost eye contact with me. And when the last of his family went by, he left the center of the road. And I had respect for that. He knows what he's doing. There's intelligence there.
Yep. Well, and it's fascinating to see, like, for example, you said, you're pretty sure we're not the only sapient. And we'd be inclined to agree. We would say that elephants and corvids right off of the bat are sapient. Both of them can use tools. Both of them actually have language. Like, they have names for each other. They have, basic things. And those languages change from group to group. So we're entirely, we're 100% on the same side as you here. We think more than that is that humans, as you said, we're not the best across all metrics. Elephants have a considerably better memory than humans do about almost everything. Corvids are considerably better at internalizing problem-solving skills. So if you look at like videos of ravens doing experiments or whatever, where they have to make tools to get the little nut inside of the trap or whatever, you will notice that the raven seldom does the experiment more than twice. And the first failure, they never fail the experiment more than once. The first failure usually has to do with coordination. The raven hasn't yet figured out exactly how its tool bends or whatever. But when you see the raven in front of the thing, it does not start until it's relatively sure exactly what it needs to do. And then it does it, it fails once, and then it finishes it perfectly. Because ravens do all of that in their head before they ever try to do it outside. And if you think about how ravens live, it makes a lot of sense. There's not much room for trial and error when you're flying through the air at 30 miles an hour, and a single mistake will have you careen into the ground and kill yourself instantly. So you don't rush in. You already know what you're going to do before you do it. And in that sense, humans kind of aren't intelligent enough to know how intelligent other animals are.
Yeah, on that note, I have to comment. There was a comment I just saw in the chat that I found completely objectionable. That said that if dogs were intelligent, they wouldn't be our pets.
No. Oh God, we see it right
are
now.
Our pets because of how intelligent they are. So intelligence is not a 100% versus 0% scale. So if you're in a situation where there is something that is more intelligent than you are, doesn't mean that you are not intelligent. You have the intelligence to know you don't you don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
For example, that these are super predators. Super predators. Dogs have evolved along with humans because we share these certain tendencies, which is that we were long distance endurance hunters.
Cursorial predators. Yeah.
And dogs were hunting the same game as people, and we learned to work together to get the same game.
Well, and we remember from The Origin of Species, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, this is one of the things that we like to bring up as like the primary retort to the people who's all like, well, you need to be strong, it's survival of the fittest. Well, first of all, survival of the fittest never showed up
and survival of the fittest is Herbert Spencer.
Herbert Spencer, yeah. Herbert Spencer.
Not Darwin.
Yeah, it never showed up. Darwin never brought that up. That was Herbert Spencer. It was a dangerous perversion of Darwin's work. But more importantly, if you actually do look in on The Origin of Species, you will notice that Darwin has this really funny little section called On the Nature of Sympathy. And when he's talking about sympathy, he, remembering a bit more of a dated term, he's talking about the nature to cooperate and the nature to work alongside other species that are not one's own, as well as species that are one's own. And he says, in no uncertain terms, that the creatures with the greatest amounts of sympathy are the ones that invariably succeed in any given environment, regardless of the environmental pressures, because team strategies are always going to be useful no matter what and no matter who with, so long as everybody is pulling their weight.
And we're a social species.
Yeah.
So as our dog.
And that was him trying to explain why being a social species is a good thing, because heightened sympathy means heightened cooperation, and heightened cooperation means more resources for everybody in both populations. So we mean, everybody's talking about, survival of the fittest. Well, Darwin doesn't actually say anything about survival of the fittest, but he does say something about team strategy and cooperation.
There's an important question in the chat that I want to address. Matt White says, did we domesticate dogs or did they domesticate us?
Yes.
It's not It's not a matter of pure intelligence. Dolphins are stunningly intelligent.
Mhm.
They are the most intelligent animals outside of our own lineage, but they don't have hands.
Or
And
modest-looking thumbs, yeah.
They live in an environment where they're not capable of performing chemical experiments. They can't do chemistry living in the water. Elephants are almost as intelligent as we are, but again, they don't have hands. They have these trunks. Can you imagine having
Two fingers.
one hand only, and in your hand you've got a pair of chopsticks, and that's all you've got to manipulate anything around you.
They're on the way, but they're not quite there yet.
So they have these physical limitations. And it's one of the frustrating things about intelligent design. If there was an intelligent designer, there would be more intelligent species than just us.
Oh, yeah.
You have something like the raccoon. Raccoons can be bipedal. They still have thumbs. They still have the wrists that are capable of doing this kind of thing. They can be dexterous with their hands. The problem that they have is that they have such a low mutation rate that they barely evolve at all. That's why raccoons across the entire northern hemisphere, they're the same thing every country you go to.
23 independent mutations every generation or something for raccoons. It's like one of the lowest ones.
Like that.
Yeah, it's one of the lowest genetic mutation rates per generation.
So you have all these animals: elephants, parrots, ravens, dolphins, and other things like this that don't have the physical ability to use that intelligence. And then you have something like a raccoon who only has the physical ability, but only gets granted the mental ability in movies.
Yeah. Well, and then we love that you bring that up, because it also brings up that intelligence is not necessarily the be-all and end-all of fitness in any given environment, even if cooperation is. One could say that the dog was actually really smart for joining up with the human early on and learning how to use the team strats. But then look at the shark. The average genius shark is no more successful than the average stupid shark, because they're already physically like as good as they need to be. So
they're physically perfect, so you can have one shark that lives for 600 years.
And it probably is the dumb one. It's probably not the smart shark. The smart shark probably dies off hundreds of years earlier thinking about the finer things in life.
Because curiosity kills.
Exactly. So a lot of people are like, oh, this animal is so dumb or whatever. Well, like, does it really matter? Because, like, look at ants. The average ant is super unintelligent. They barely have a brain at all. They're
individually,
microscopic little brain, but together with with their jaws and their 6 little legs, millions and millions of them can dominate the planet, and they have for millions and millions of years. So we don't. Obviously, we like being intelligent because we're human, and that's our thing. But we don't necessarily think that, even if the dog were dumber, we don't think it would be any worse off because it teamed up with us, and that was the smartest thing it could have ever done with itself. And that's what we mean when we say that, when we go after Darwin's notes, that increased sympathy increases fitness no matter where you are, because the dog could have been dropped into the worst place in the world for being a dog, but as long as it's got a human, it's got somebody to watch its back, it takes care, and it goes on, and we both go on together. And that's the most valuable part of evolution, is that
the advantage that dogs had was that their social communication, which we've still never figured out. How it is that they coordinate their hunting strategies and the paths that they're going to do, that they use. But it's the same kind of thing overall that we do. Mm-hmm. So we and dogs were the only species to do the long distance endurance hunting techniques that both of our species did. And so we were hunting the same game at the same time, the same way. It's not at all surprising that we began to share resources.
Oh, no, exactly. And for example...
But dogs don't have the ability to make spears.
They don't have the ability to make spears, exactly. So, and that's why we say it's like that's probably the smartest thing the wolf could have ever done for itself is join up with us. And as you say, we don't know how wolves set up their tracks. Now we think we actually might have a counter to that. Having dogs, loving dogs, researching dogs for a long time. So humans, nomadic humans, don't just wander around. They have routes that they go on, and most migratory animals are the same way. Now, wolves don't, and many canids, as well as several different panthera and felines, they have territories where now, with the benefit of modern technology, modern surveillance technology, we know they actually they have paths they mark out and routes that they go on. So when the wolf pack starts running after the deer and chases the deer into the woods, the wolf pack already knows many different routes it can run that deer down. And if the deer doesn't work out for it, well, that's okay. Route 1B didn't get taken, we'll give the backup bark or the backup noise or whatever, and then the pack will move to its next place to funnel them down Route B, where our buddies are waiting to attack them. Well, eventually our buddies became humans who had themselves learned the same hunting routes and so on. So then the wolves chase the enemy down Route B right into the pokey stick, and then everybody eats tonight. And anytime you see team strategies, anytime you see social animals that hunt, you invariably start getting that. You invariably start getting territorial routes, various different trails that are pre-marked and pre-established, maybe not in words, but by the social trust. Everybody knows instinctively you're supposed to run the deer down this route. And then the humans notice it. Humans set themselves up at the end of the pack. The deer gets run down that route. The humans kill it. And the humans, thankful for recognizing the pattern in these wolves, feed these wolves back, so no fights happen. And then the wolves, thankful to be fed, that they guarantee their work was worth it because they have food instead of just the chance at food, don't kill the humans. And then they start working on that over time, and gradually they get better and better. And we think back in the day, humans were probably a lot more perceptive of the body language of different animals because it was more tied to their survival, whereas today we don't have to worry about that as much.
That's a concern I have right now with humanity. The thing that made us great is not in use so much today. And I don't mean to change the topic of the conversation.
We fully agree.
Yeah.
What's worse is that
there was a time when we didn't have the short response muscle fibers that chimpanzees or gorillas had. If we get into a fight with a lion, we're just going to lose.
Oh yeah, we're dead. Yeah.
But what we did have that chimpanzees still to this day don't is we had the compassion of group camaraderie that chimpanzees don't exhibit. So that if all of us, there's 20 of us lying around, and suddenly this huge Dinophilus attacks.
Right.
Everybody
in the
runs.
Chimpanzee group will run, but in humans, like we will pick up our sticks and kill it. Yeah.
We take off like zebras or wildebeest or whatever, anything else, any other herd animal, we take off running. But when one of our own is cornered and there's a chance to save it, I've seen this with Cape buffalo. When even a Cape buffalo can figure out that, hey, there's enough of us.
Yeah.
And this is what humans do. So any one of us is versus a Dinophilus, we're all dead. Any one of us. But all of us?
No. Yeah. Well, and we've got a hypothesis about how the human mind works, that one of the ways we got where we did, that's alongside that one. Humans are funny. Very few other places in the animal kingdom that we know of, at least, certainly not on the farmyard, do we respond to fear by eating the thing that causes us fear. We'll never forget it was this like food channel or whatever. This little Japanese girl has this food channel on YouTube, 5 years ago or whatever. And her big thing was that she orders live animals for food and then kills and butchers them and cooks them all there in her kitchen. And so she ordered a Pacific octopus. And immediately, as soon as she opens up the box, it just starts flailing around and grabbing at her, and she just starts screaming. This little 4'8" Japanese girl can't be more than 80 pounds. Starts wailing and freaking out, and it's flopping all over the place and everything as she's taking it out of the tank. And then it just cuts out, as it does. And then the next thing, when it comes back in, she's just shoving huge pieces of Pacific octopus that are deep fried into her mouth, en masse, as fast as she possibly can, because we're humans. We eat the things that scare us.
Yeah, I didn't need that image. I just got to be straight up. I didn't.
Sorry.
I realize that I'm a hypocrite because that I still eat meat at all. But it's a problem of our biology. So straight up veganism is not possible for everybody. I mean, just straight up. I don't know if it's possible for me. I'll be, I've never tried to be vegan, but the issue that I have is I have a certain level of hypocrisy, that I have a bias that the more intelligent the animal is, the more right it has not to be eaten.
And we'd agree with you on that one. We think octopuses are definitely up there. We don't eat octopus.
I try not to eat. There's a place that we go that sells octopus, and I have had octopus there, and I feel bad about it. And I rarely eat pork because we had a pet pig here a while ago, and I understand that pigs are smarter than dogs, and I got to see a little bit of that. So I have trouble with eating anything that's more intelligent.
Yeah,
I don't know that there's any justification in what I'm saying. It's just my own personal bias. I fully admit my hypocrisy and my bias.
Well, so from a personal ethical point of view, we totally understand, because again, this comes back to sympathy. If you can think about an animal being more intelligent, the closest thing that you probably come to is the animal has thoughts that are more akin to my own. Yeah, an animal that is more intelligent, closer to my intelligence, has thoughts that are more akin to my own. And if you think about what you think about getting killed and eaten, usually it's not pretty favorable. So it's reasonable. It's reasonable to take that opinion with animals. And that's why we believe that, for example, it's a lot less morally bankrupt, as it were. We're not a vegan, by the way. We cannot be a vegan because we are part of a particular strain of humanity that does not digest and process plant protein as well as meat protein, which is more common. That mutation is more common the more northerly you get. And
it's a problem of your biology. What happens when you're
purely genetics? Yeah.
What happens when you're a moral vampire?
Yeah.
The fuck you gonna do?
Well, then you get ketchup vampires, obviously. That was an old movie. Anybody who gets that reference is a champion.
For me, a large part of it is does the animal know terror? Because I don't want to eat anything that has experienced terror, and you don't have to be very intelligent to understand that.
Most animals feel
so.
Terror.
The things that we buy meat now, it's an awful lot about how it was raised.
Yeah,
The meat market is insidious.
Yeah.
And we want something that had a nice, happy pastoral life, and then suddenly blindsided, maybe.
Exactly, and that's exactly how we do things here on Happy Place Farm. That's how we do it with all of our animals.
Happy Place Farm.
It's called Happy Place Farm. We didn't name it. That's just the name of it. Happy Place Farm. That's how we do all of our dispatching, no matter what animal it was. We had a pig. We decided no more pigs after that, but I get you. Yeah. We decided. Well, pigs are biological bulldozers. She just kept pushing her way straight through the chicken pen fence and eating all of the eggs, and obviously we couldn't have that. So we gave her a watermelon, a just spoiled watermelon, and boom, right in the back of the head, super quick, no pain, and that's preferable. That's how we.
Somebody mentions in the chat that cows can experience terror. I'm aware of that.
Oh yeah. And we legitimately believe that if you're going to eat meat, you should eat meat from an animal that lived its best life and was killed instantly. Like without knowing it, without and
without any fear, without any oppression.
exactly. And so a big really common thing, one thing that we did with the pig, we do this with every animal, let them smell your gun first. Like, if you're going to kill them, at least give them, here, this is the thing, don't be afraid of it. Here's food, here's something pleasant, pat it on the back, give it some time, make sure there is no fear, because nobody needs that. No, by being an intelligent human, we can think like, yeah, nobody needs that, man. Come on, like, let's be real. And from an oddly spiritual point of view, when you think of it from that perspective, that animal is giving its life to preserve yours. So you should be at least thankful of it. That animal died so you could live, so you should be respectful of it. And we think we've come too far from that understanding. People don't, we actually know people who think that the food is made at the store, and that farmers should not be there anymore, that we shouldn't have farms. We've had people actually tell us this, that we shouldn't have farms because that's where animals get killed, and we should instead just get all of our meat from the store where it's made. And we're like, what?
So what were we just talking about? We were just talking about animal intelligence.
Yeah, now we have to worry about human intelligence. But
I remember listening to a newscast where this woman had called into the news store or the news show to say that they had these deer crossings on the freeway, but where the signs were that were deer crossings, well, that's very dangerous. Why don't they move these deer crossings to safer places for the deer to cross? And the DJs had to think about what she was saying and say, the deer aren't reading the signs.
Yeah,
because this woman thought
for us.
This woman thought the deer are going wherever the sign says to go.
Yeah.
What?
No, sorry. That's very much the creature so stupid that if you can't see it, it doesn't exist.
The ravenous bug bladder beast of Trawl.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, PhilosoShy, we've been 2 hours at this, and this was a good time.
This was great.
I want to thank you for bringing in your bullet points and everything. This was really good. I want to ask you for a closing statement so we can pull this together.
All it takes to disprove creationism is a simple understanding of the barnyard and of the animals on it. And we think of the 3 times we've been on your channel, we think we've shown that, and we may continue to do so, because it's just the gift that keeps on coming. The basic daily life of handling animals, of breeding things and stuff like that, and you automatically see, like, the Bible is full of shit and Noah was an idiot. Either admit that Noah was an idiot and the Bible is full of shit, or that none of it is real at all. We'll take either. We are merciful.
They're kind of the same thing, but what option do you have?
Right. Thanks so much for having us. It's always great to be on your channel.
It's absolutely my pleasure. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.